Hello and welcome back to Podcasting as Praxis. I'm David, my pronouns are he and him.
I'm James, and my pronouns are they and them.
I'm Jamie, my pronouns are he and him.
I'm Rob, mine are he and him.
And I'm Alistair, and my pronouns are also he and him.
Full house, and we are joined by a very special guest, Phil Burton-Cartledge.
Hello, I'm Phil, and I'm he and him as well.
How are you doing, Phil? Are you glad to be on this wonderful tech pioneering podcast that's definitely not fell apart 4 times before we started recording?
Well, you know, on the day that the United States government announced the breakthrough in terms of fusion reactions, we got received ignition. I think, you know, it's really, you know, I've done a bit of pioneering myself. This is my first time ever on Discord, so in that spirit, I'm very glad to be here with you, with fellow pioneers.
We love to be the podcast that breaks new ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All we're saying is give us the keys to the fusion reactor.
Yeah, we promise we won't do anything funny at CERN. So,
Stick a pepper armour in the Large Hadron Collider, things of that nature.
Watch it magically transform into a small plate.
You would just fire your keys around that for a laugh at one point, wouldn't you?
oh, absolutely.
Oh, I can't,
Just a lot of British journalists chasing after them down the pipe.
Oh. Right, Rob, do you want to kick us off? What we got first?
Yeah, sure. So first things first, I thought briefly, because I like to keep an eye out on people who are on my list, is the recent goings on with Therese Coffey, previously of the DWP under a couple days under Liz Truss, and now shunted
previously
over
to that from hell itself.
Yes, and previously our winner of I think worst Tory for when we did our last awards show. Or worst
hard-won award,
that was most
antibiotics shared with friends.
But yeah, so previously she was an absolute monster over at the DWP, and now it turns out shockingly that she is a monster at DEFRA as well. So, you know, if you didn't know, food prices are going up massively, and as is the huge demand for food banks. But there was a big.
Phototropes may not know this.
Yeah, if you don't consume food, write in. But a recent report came out that said that like farmers are also making like less than ever from the stuff they make, even though the prices are much higher than they used to be. The calculation was roughly that they were making less than a penny's worth of profit in terms of every loaf sold in the supermarket. So if you buy one for like £1 or something, the farmer will get less than a penny's worth of that. There's similar stories in terms of eggs, cheese, sort of the big commodities that you buy in the supermarket. Now, of course, that's partly because of energy prices, which are a huge factor in final food prices. But if farmers aren't making the money and a lot of them are going bust and the consumers are paying high prices, well, somebody's making money in the middle, like they have to. And essentially the people making money in the middle is, of course, the traders, the supermarkets, and the processors who are making the real money while they do very little of the actual risky stuff, which is to grow and produce the food that we all have to eat. But according to Therese Coffey, this is essentially all just fine. That supermarkets are actually doing really good work at competing for consumer business, so we shouldn't be worried about it, and farmers should just shut their mouth and
the raison d'etre of the supermarket is to just compete against other businesses, not to fucking feed people. Fucking.
That would be socialism.
The feeding people is just a byproduct of of the competition thing. I think that's how like the Tories are genuinely seeing it at the moment. But at least, you know, in a spot of good news, they have cancelled that weird plan that was a thing under Truss for a couple of days, where they said actually we don't like farmland and it should be more filled with solar panels. Or no, it was the other way around. They were like, no, if you have farmland, you shouldn't be allowed to put solar panels on it because we want more food security. Which was just bizarre, essentially. But yeah, she also...
You can just grow the food under the panels, can't you? No, I mean, seriously, I've seen that where they have like farms where they have the solar panels and then underneath is like actual food being grown.
Maybe it depends on the crop, and it depends on your latitude and sunlight exposure. In countries where it's very sunny, then you can absolutely do that. I don't know how that holds up for the UK.
I mean, you can just
grow fucking mushrooms or something.
yeah, I was literally going to say you can do mushrooms. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
Truffles. There you go, Rob.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, you can farm black truffles, so I suppose you could.
Don't. No,
let
sorry.
them
I'm sorry. I said the
truffles,
T word. I
great,
shouldn't
yeah.
have said fucking truffle.
We love to have a Rob-centric economy, don't we?
An economy that just produces fancy treats for fancy lads. Isn't that kind of what we're edging toward anyway? So
Edging, I think we're like up to the hilt in
here
now.
we go.
No, here we do not go. Here we do not go. Move on.
But yeah, she also, in the same hearing, she also said that it wasn't the role of the government to provide free food. So I don't, apparently the role of the government is neither to provide free food nor to protect anybody from the vagaries of the marketplace, which is just, it's really good.
She's right in the Airbud sense. Like, there's no rule that says the government has to provide free food.
That's just a question of what happens when you've got people that are actually hungry, I suppose.
Hopefully they storm like the Houses of Parliament and leave every single person in there.
A nice thank you note.
So yeah, the other thing I want to talk about before we get to the main topic is the great success of Labour's last week's big business conference at Canary Wharf and what was said there.
I'm hearing that Labour is back in business. In fact,
They
that's all
are.
I've been fucking hearing for about 3 years.
They are. It's the same slogan was repeated a number of times by well-connected Labour insiders or some other such euphemism. But I do think it's important to it's good to get a heads up of what's really going on with the new Labour Party as it talks to its real constituency, which is people. Sorry?
It talks to itself.
Yes. Well, and it talks to people with a lot of money because they want to get some of it. The platinum sponsorship tier was £25,000.
The Labour Party brought to you by NordVPN.
Yeah, do you get bonus clips with that?
Almost.
Was it like a Christmas raffle or something they did one year where it was like if you donated like £250, you got put into a raffle to like get a signed copy of a speech by Starmer as well as a dinner with some absolutely like horrendous shit for the princely sum that was on offer.
I can't imagine the kind of Luke Akehurst emotes you unlock from that tier of subscription. It's fantastic.
They should just do like a good old. What happened to the meat raffle? Why can't they just do that again, like a pheasant raffle or something?
They're a political party, Rob, not a pub with a flat roof.
Also, to be fair, they are technically selling a ham.
Fail.
But yeah, in terms of getting bonus clips, Jamie, you're not far wrong. It would mean that people talking on stage would have to break character for a moment and do sponsorship plugs for you. So I think at a certain point it'd be like the Truman Show where they just turn to camera and just go, this lovely banking product was brought to me by HSBC, a full-service bank that I very much love.
By the way, did you know that I like to traffic in the money made by cartels when they sell cocaine? Brought to you by HSBC.
Could you imagine for a moment if you hand over your 25 grand or your 20 grand or whatever, and you go and meet a shadow cabinet member of your choice, how insufferably crawling and obsequious they would be. Like, oh, you're such a great wealth creator.
I mean, I was thinking about Wes Streeting, so before they even opened their mouth, I already thought crawling and creepy.
Well, I mean, he's just he's a byword for everything that is wrong in the Labour Party.
Imagine you're a private healthcare investor and you give the Labour Party 25 grand, and then you get to meet Wes Streeting, and when you shake his hand, it's sticky.
For 24 grand, you unlock the "Will Be Serenaded" by Wes Streeting tier, and for 25 grand, you don't get that. Labour really know how to play to their strengths.
But yeah, you only have to pay 20,000 to get a meeting of your choice with a member of the shadow cabinet, which is just, I mean, it's very much in line.
Bring
Love
into that meeting.
I've been in a room where Rachel Reeves once gave an after-dinner speech.
My condolences.
Yeah, and she told a joke, and as you can imagine, it was, she doesn't have the most, how should I say, inspiring or human of cadences, but it was awful, just awful. And she was trying to be funny. Then, can you imagine if she's trying to be businesslike? It must be. But
I was assured by the New Statesman that Rachel Reeves was a great communicator.
Did she tell the same story thing that Keir Starmer likes to fall back on, which is about a mix-up with rooms at a hotel? Because I swear that's the only fucking scare quote human anecdote that they have in the shadow cabinet at the moment.
No, she told a joke about the Liberal Democrats.
Oh, what was that?
Digging for low-hanging fruit. Well done.
Was it was it David Cameron who was Tory leader and someone got slow clapped during a speech or something, and then I don't know if it was Cameron that got slow clapped and someone else kept making jokes about it or the other way around, but there was some dipshit just kept turning up on the news and talking about how their opponent couldn't tell the difference between applause and a slow clap. And I think I saw 8 different clips of them saying that, and it was just like, Jesus Christ, who told you this was a good line?
Oh God, it must be just appalling, essentially. I mean, but the whole thing is, of course, part of a bigger swap out that they've been running for essentially since Starmer got in. But since they've just literally said, yeah, we don't actually want union money or union backing anymore. We're just going to get more corporate donations, because that means everything. That means we're on the side of business in all the sense of the word. But the people in the audience did get what they wanted to hear, which is, for one, Rachel Reeves saying she wouldn't commit to saying that nurses would get more money from a Labour government, which sort of follows up from West Streeting this week, saying that the BMA, and I think by extension the NHS, needs more of a can-do attitude, which I just found
my fucking God on fire. Sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, that was essentially my point. It was well made. No, just absolutely incredible. And also, Starmer said it could guarantee that they would repeal minimum service laws that are about to be put on the books. Mandating by law a certain amount of minimum service, like trains and stuff. Although hilariously, I don't know if you guys saw it. Earlier this week, they were asking I think it was the former Army Chief of Staff or something, about whether or not, how the Army was going to step in and become a nurse and drive trains and all that stuff.
That's so good.
Did everybody see this? It's incredible. They essentially said, look, the Army's also just getting a 4% under inflation pay rise, so I'm not sure whether or not it's a good idea to ask the Army to do more things.
Imagine the fucking cognitive whiplash this island would get if our brave lads went on strike.
It is darkly amusing, which I feel like whenever we talk about the Labour Party, it just ends up being darkly amusing. The fact that we are talking about a Labour Party that is astronomically ahead in the polls, and presumably the people who were saying, oh, they need to say that they're going to do or not going to do anything for anyone, because then they can. The turn of phrase was keep the service area for attack as narrow as possible. It's they're now head and shoulders ahead of the Tories in the polls, and they're still going on these fucking lines about, you get nothing, fuck you, lick my boot, vote for us. That's it. That's all they've got on offer. And that is what the fucking Labour Party is now. Well, pretty much always has been.
My favourite part about all this is how they finally did actually make 20 points ahead. It lasted a few days, and it's already started slipping, because the Tories just decided, just put Rishi Sunak back in the house, just put him inside. Nobody has to see him. But Starmer's not got the message, so everybody's just seeing this prick and directing all their ire towards him.
I do like that Labour is like approaching this from a perspective of how can we be like a stealth bomber party, just have a low profile as possible to radar, just not be picked up by anyone, have no policies that anyone can like in any way, shape or form detect. We just want the average voter
James,
to glance off us.
You've read far too much into their stealth bomber policy.
Yeah. And also, James, in this analogy, is the UK like a Yemeni wedding or something?
Oh, that one was too dark for me, Rob. God damn.
Oh, I mean, it might as well be.
That's what they should do to raise funds, though. Is like like the
bomb more weddings
where you can pay. No, where you can pay the Ukrainians to like video a drone strike on the Russians. Like, you pay like a certain amount of money on the fucking like Ukrainian military Patreon, and then they like they blow up a Russian house.
But you can do that already.
Of like the missile going in the window.
New Labour photo
I'm not fucking kidding. You can. There's some Patreon out there where you can like get your name or like a message to Putin written on the side of like a Ukrainian.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, and if they miss, they'll keep trying with more missiles until they get a sufficient body count to like slate your bloodlust.
Right, so there's going to be a new Labour photo op where Keir Starmer's holding a PlayStation controller, and then it's going to cut to like a video, one of those like grayscale videos of like an AC-130 just like gunning down various houses.
Yeah, the houses will be in the red wall.
Are back.
But yeah, one final thing from this Labour conference, because it leads quite nicely into our main topic, and also why Phil is here on Discord for the first time, is so the big thing that they announced is they want to have, right as like the tech bubble is imploding and money is expensive again, Britain needs to become startup nation. That's the thing that's going to be, innovation is going to be the thing that saves Britain. And the way they're going to do that is more tax relief for investors in startups, as well as how much can be invested and like you can get tax rebates on.
It's also crypto is a pretty big element of that, is it not?
It can. I mean, not all startups are crypto. I think it's only like 80% or something.
a mere most of them.
Yeah. But yeah, they'll be helped this time by the university sector, who is becoming. Let me read from. This is from like some of their briefing materials. A Labour government should publish annually a dashboard summarising each university's offer to spin-outs and metrics of each university's spin-out success. So, spin-outs are essentially a university has a good idea and then they commercialize it, and that's called a spin-out. Like they use the patent in a commercial sense. And it's just like, well, what if we have this research sector, and what if we just commercialize more of it? Like that would be good. And the thing they're citing as like an actual example of that being good is the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine.
For fuck's sake. Mm. Something that was a horrendous idea from its inception, fucking doing a private partnership on a fucking vaccine of all things, thanks to Sir Billiam Gates.
But yeah, this sort of leads us nicely into tonight's main topic, because I know I wasn't on last week, James, when you made the casual joke when you guys briefly talked about the constitutional reform paper that Gordon Brown and his compatriots wrote, and you said, well, we're just going to do some highlights because obviously Rob's not on to read 150 pages. Well, Rob's back, and me and Phil have read 155 pages of the Labour constitutional reform paper.
It's cool. Like, you're Rob, and that's why I drink. Carry on.
So yeah, the reason I want to talk about it is, like, I think it's an interesting... I do think the document itself, like, if you sort of leave the political stuff and what's being said about it afterwards, what's been going on, I do think, like, the sort of the philosophical angle they're trying to take and how they're trying to fix Britain, quote unquote, is sort of an interesting way of going about it. And I know, Phil, when we were briefly talking about it earlier, that, like, at first I thought this is just, leveling up, but with a red coat of paint on it. But I will agree with you that it's, like, slightly more than that.
Yeah, I think... firstly, it's guided entirely by technocratic concerns. So this is not some sort of, we're going to hand power back to the people. It's not being sold like that at all. It's basically fully within the bounds of capitalist realism. And what I wrote a blog post on this recently. And what I argue is what Starmer's doing here is effectively trying to create a new political economy for Britain, or what we call in the jargon a new regime of accumulation. Because his idea is the state should intervene more in the economy, as per the Keynesian state of old that some old Labour types get nostalgic about. But even that state was quite centralised. So what he wants to do is obviously have a kind of a national overview, a national strategy, but also allow local councils and local authorities be authors of their own destiny. So they can be like little little Keynesian fiefdoms who invest locally in their particularly dynamic sectors of their economy. The report identifies somewhere around the region of 280 economic clusters up and down the land. And so Gordon Brown's big idea is if you decentralise everything and give local councils the kind of power that they need, and the money that they need that can't be clawed back by central government, then you'll start to see all these local authorities starting to invest in their local economies, and over a period of time everything will be better. And I mean, on paper, from a standpoint of economic growth under a capitalist model that doesn't address any of the kind of power imbalances inherent to the wage and labour and capital relationship, seems like a good idea. Wonks would love it.
Yeah.
It creates new careers for wonks, new think tanks. It's going to be a golden age for anyone who's into policy, basically.
I mean, the best case scenario here, however, is that assuming the best case scenario, like Labour councils are implementing whatever changes it is that this would allow them to do, it would still be fucking Labour councils who I think we have a pretty broad understanding on what your average Labour council is like.
I mean,
is that good?
I think
mark.
I think the assumption underlying it, because one that I live in Stoke-on-Trent, and I've been in the Labour Party now for 13 years. One of the kind of like old soaks in the local party was very right wing, and probably the nearest to evil I've ever met. Former Labour councillor and member of the European Parliament as well. But he... that's the nearest to evil. You can't be truly evil and be in the European Parliament. That's like Diet Coke evil. But he always used to moan about the quality of the councillors that were coming through, because he used to say, you live in Stoke-on-Trent, if you've got anything about you, there's no opportunities around here, which is partly true, and you go off to another place. So, here I am living in Stoke-on-Trent and I work in Derby, I'm the living instantiation of what he was talking about. But I think what Starmer's thinking is that if you give local authorities proper power, a real chance to do something, then those educated types, people like Keir Starmer and Wes Streeting, will be more interested in getting involved in local government, because then they'll be able to make a difference. They'll be able to kind of, go to all the right parties, be in the paper for all the right reasons, and do all the sexy stuff and kind of hang around wearing hard hats on building sites. And I think that is the thinking behind it. They'll be able to attract a new layer of graduate types into the cadre of official councildom. That will then feed through into the members of Parliament as well. You'll have people who are technocratically minded, who will then feed through into the PLP, locking out the left forever. But, making sure that you've actually got MPs who are centrists, but actually know a bit about policy, know a bit about how the world works, as opposed to some of the dullards in the parliamentary party at the moment.
They're trying to... It's a bit about trying to build, bridge that gap, about the trite thing that people say about politics is, they're just professionals now. There's no more people who have, experience of running a quick fit or something. There's no more, it's all technocrats now. And with this way of doing it, you can be both and a technocrat and you can wear your hard hat at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I can imagine that, you come at with lots of universities, lots of universities are interested in what they call graduate retention, i.e., making sure that their graduates stick around in the local area where they did their degrees. And that's particularly the case in, down at hill areas like Stoke-on-Trent or places like Bradford and so on, because the idea is graduates stick around, they'll create their own jobs or they'll get better paid jobs, and then their spend will be in the local economy. And so if you have a local authority that actually does a lot of economic planning, that'll create loads of jobs for local graduates, and they'll kind of see their future in a kind of technocratically minded Labour Party. I mean, I think it was...
And this is...
I was going to say,
Phil, go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it was Clement Attlee who kind of observed, or it might have been, I can't remember, it was one of the Labour folks from 1945 who believed that by expanding the capacity of the state after the war, it was able to attract cadres of middle-class types who were dedicated to social engineering and making the country a better place, and that kind of the scope of the state and the possibility of planning attracted the best from graduatedom and from middle-class professions, and I think this is what Starmer's aiming for.
I feel like the chief, again, we're talking about Labour councils here who... It seems that their chief export is selling public land to private developers to sit on. So doing that with a higher level of education, so doing that more efficiently sounds like it's going to have great outcomes.
I mean, one of my huge problems with this piece, and I agree it's more filled in, but certainly the first couple of chapters and the initial thought about it is this sort of... It reminds me of, you remember in 2019 when we had the shitty elections and like we had all the, or it was 2017, where all the journalists, like they left London and they went on like Red Wall Safari, and they did the same thing, post-Brexit. They went to all the Leave constituencies and, they found out, and hang on for a big shocker here, that outside London, a lot of people are poor and unhappy. And it's just like... They're doing this again, and it's a lot of its thinking. I'm fairly sure comes from Lisa. Is it Lisa Nandy's think tank, the thing for towns and cities? I'm fairly sure.
Almost certainly.
Yeah. So
it must be.
If it's got town and city, yeah, that's just got Lisa Nandy written all over it.
Yeah, because she's the towns person.
Lisa Nandy has her own council because she is herself a town.
Weirdly enough, it's her mother and father who are the councillors. So like for me, it's just like it's that, and it's to me this whole like, oh, we need to, Britain is a highly centralized government. It's like, again, those are not new observations. Like everybody has said this. I think even if you read like the foreword to the Boris Johnson levelling up thing, they say the same thing. But now the new invention once again seems to be, and this is like it is like being in 1997 all over again. It's like, no, the thing that we need to do is localize more, devolve power to where it needs to reside, and then let that power, i.e. councils or metropolitan mayors or some other layer, because they do propose like even more layers of government in this thing in some ways, which they don't fully flesh out, so it's kind of hard to grasp. But essentially that like we would just have more letting agents, but this time the letting agents would like have more power to raise taxes, essentially. So like for me, if this was the result of the big think, all of it is just the same thing that we've been doing for the last 20 years, or been trying to do. Or I don't know, maybe I'm being too negative about it, Phil.
I mean, the problem with Keir Starmer, of course, is that because he's reneged on so many of his promises previously, you don't know what he's going to actually implement and what he isn't. But I think he said that this is going out to consultation now amongst party members.
Yes.
And that so whatever comes back will be, it'll be, ready to, day one Labour government will hit the ground running, and, the spades will be in the ground, and, all of this stuff will kick off more or less straight away. We're not going to be talking about it, we're going to be doing it. But because it is couched in technocratic terms and capitalist realist terms, I don't think there's really any danger of Starmer not doing this, because he's not, where he's talking about balancing out things, like for giving local power to local people effectively. Again, it's not challenging the capital-labour relationship. He's not promising to reverse austerity that has been visited on local councils over the last 12 years. I mean, before I read this, I went back to the 2019 manifesto. The promises in the 2019 manifesto about local government was basically give all the councils their money back. So he's not offering them anything. it's sort of within that kind of neoliberal purview of, with previous governments have asked you to be entrepreneurial, but now we're going to give you the tools that will enable you to be so.
Yes. And now the councils, but again, it sort of it still resides on the exact same model that certainly since '97, but I think probably earlier than that is, it's they keep relying on the public-private model where the public sector, more empowered at the local level, will give certain levels of certainly financial guarantees to sort of incentivize businesses to come to these places. And these places this time are not just like the anywheres, they are these, what you were referencing at the start, they are these economic clusters, which seems to be the big new thingamajig, the big thinking. Let me read a little bit from the report itself. Success in one part of the country tends to breed further success, and further investment tends to follow where money has already gone. We need to break this pattern, certainly not by preventing investment in successful businesses in the southeast, but by encouraging similarly self-reinforcing cycles of investment in all parts of the country. To do this, we must encourage the UK's powerful investors to widen their investments beyond and around London.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd like a party to promise to actually do something, not just to encourage some other fucking pricks who I wish were dead to do something instead. Do you know what I mean? Or we got to encourage the entrepreneurs, or we encouraging them to
grow as people and not exploit their fellow man.
Because if not, I don't care.
Well, Starmer says that one of the things that this report pledges to do is move 50,000 civil service jobs out of London. And we've seen little bits of this under Boris Johnson. He moved the Treasury to Darlington, didn't he? 600 jobs there. And this has been floating around in the ether for a long time. When I was a kid growing up in Derby, there was talk of moving something to do with the National Prison Service to Derby. And it was going to create all of these jobs and everything was going to be wonderful, and it was going to regenerate this old railway siding. It never happened, but the railway siding eventually got regenerated anyway. But
did they turn it into luxury flats by any chance?
It became a gym, and had a soft play area, and there are some flats on there.
Was it a luxury gym and soft play area?
This is Derby we're talking about.
Look, if they really want to coax people out of London, what they need to do is it needs to be a gym, soft play area where you can go as an adult, have drinks in a ball pit. Because that's as far as I understand it, that's why people go to London.
I really thought, Alistair, you were going to say burn London down, because that is usually your answer to most things.
It's a very love-hate relationship with London. Like, there are things in London that are good, it's just all the other stuff.
Just take those out.
I just really want to know whether it's a creepy soft play area or a wet soft play area, honestly, but maybe that's just
It had windows, so make of that what you will.
But those are the two choices for a soft play area, creepy or wet.
I'm referencing a meme, Jamie, doesn't matter.
Now I'm thinking of
I'm clearly not down with the youth.
Now I'm just thinking of a ball pit, but just filled with
your soft play areas, if you will.
But I mean, this is to me, this is they're doing a contradiction in terms, because they say, well, we have identified, and by we they also mean like McKinsey and the last Tory government. Like, there's a whole bunch of people who have identified different numbers of these existing clusters. They mention some specific ones, like cybersecurity and digital warfare in southern Wales. They mentioned something. I had it. Here. Let me read you from the report. Think of Dundee, once world-leading in Jute, as one of the international innovators in video games, responsible for Grand Theft Auto and Minecraft, with many more world-beating innovations possible with the right investment.
Rob,
sorry.
Do you want to just quickly remind me how much investment and tax money companies that develop games like Grand Theft Auto have returned to Britain?
Less than zero. They get money from the government because of a series of extremely well-designed tax breaks.
Investment.
Also, since when was Minecraft created in Dundee? I thought it was that
don't
Swedish
think about
racist that made it.
Yes, but I think maybe the studio is in Dundee or something. Who the hell knows? But like for me, so there's like two central problems. The first is Grand Theft Auto, not a good example because Rockstar Games literally, I think by the last time we looked at this, they were paying zero taxes to the UK government, and they were like employing people. But this is the problem with the clustering thing is like, okay, so we want investment outside of London, we want it in new places, but the places they identify are the places where that or activity is already taking place, right? You know, there's a couple of video games in Dundee, so you would empower Dundee Council to, I don't know, build more correct buildings or give tax breaks to some other video game company or make sure that video game startups, you know, that it's you create like a Dundee Silicon Valley makeup.
Sorry, can I come in here because this was annoying me and I just had to check, right? You know, I was talking about Minecraft being made in Dundee. Turns out no, it's 4J Studios Limited ported Minecraft to consoles and handheld platforms.
Fantastic.
That's the high watermark, you know, Grand Theft Auto, and then we ported this existing game to other platforms. That's it. That's the British games industry.
I feel like also naming Minecraft is just stealing the thunder of Zack and Tarn Adams.
So the Rockstar thing and the clusters thing is part of this larger package that the report calls for, which is a new economy for a new Britain. New Britain, by the way, is the sort of capstone slogan of the whole thing. No. You know, Tory Britain is old Britain and New Britain is New Britain.
I just want to say right now, like, whenever one of these fuckers comes out and says, oh yeah, we've got a new political economy for Britain. No, it's the exact same political economy, but with just a slightly different, like, bell or whistle on it. Like, you're not uprooting the entire fundamental comprehension of this country.
See, all I hear when you say New Britain, right, coming from Labour, is I just hear the Tories going, New Labour, New Danger, New Britain, and it just it all rhymes as poetry. I love it.
Yeah, so essentially the purpose of New Britain is they've done a whole bunch of like polling and stuff to show that people across the UK, including Scotland, Ireland and Wales, have similar values and things that they want to have better, and all of these are encapsulated in New Britain. The purpose of which should be grounded in these shared values and aspirations that unite the people across the country, blah, 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 blah. And the vision for this New Britain goes something like this. I've synthesized a little bit. New Britain is a union of nations where power is close to you and accountable and ensure you have a minimum standard of living. This is done through spreading opportunity and jobs through regional clusters of connected industries, the thing we were just talking about, which are supported through Westminster and local funding. Furthermore, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, which are now on the verge of fucking off, will be drawn back into this wonderful union of nations of New Britain through even more devolution and more home rule / self-government. All of this will be underpinned through a new legally binding constitution-ish bit of lawmaking and a duty of care at every level of government, and all the governments will work better together.
More devolution for the constituent nations, with the exception of being allowed to leave it.
Yeah, I mean, are we promoting synergy as well? As part
yes,
of
we
this?
are. Yes.
Yeah. I yearn for death.
I think you'll find, Jamie, that your death synergizes really well with New Britain.
And the synergy, Jamie, in case you were, I know you're dying to ask me, so I'm going to ask you anyway. The synergy comes from that Westminster for too long has had too much power, and if we devolve more power, but then the councils and Westminster and new like regional authorities or existing regional authorities would work better together, and the way they would do that, and they would be overseen by a revised House of Lords, which is now what is it again? Is it, Phil? Is it the Council of Regions and Nations, or Nations and Regions? I think that's what it's called.
It is, yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
I've got a theory. So the thesis of living in Britain, adjacent to the antithesis of dying in Britain, synthesized as becoming a mindless, undead entity that is able to just work and toil endlessly.
Well,
does that work?
No, because Innovation, a genius which has characterized Britain over centuries, is the key to Britain restoring our prosperity in the 21st century.
So not necromancy then.
Well, advances in necromancy are part of innovation. So the thing is, we would have all these devolved authorities and these regional economic clusters, and if you're asking, what would they do? Is they would Labour / McKinsey / the Tory government / the some institutes have found 5 new industries that they want these clusters and these localities to focus on to spread jobs and opportunity, and they are genetics.
One of which is necromancy. Okay.
Well,
yes,
genetics.
exactly.
Yeah. Genetics, AI, high value added manufacturing, and 3D printing, which is I'm not really sure how that works, as well as
I'm not going to lie, Rob. These could all fall under necromancy. So I'm
does clean green technology fall under it as well?
I mean,
it
sure,
does,
why not?
because necromancy is just technically healing, but you've done it too late. So it's absolutely like green technology these days, yeah?
I mean,
we have too many corpses in fucking graves that we need to bring back so that they can continue their labour.
I mean, I would argue that necromancy, if anything, is circular economy at its best.
Reduce, reuse, recycle the dead.
Yeah, exactly. Reduce, reuse, recycle, reanimate, I think is the way to.
Yeah.
Well, that's my next D&D campaign sorted. Thanks, Rob.
So basically, by getting all these clusters to do all these things, we will create the new economies, which, as we were talking about, create all this local wealth and also revitalize the high street. Because, of course, in order to revitalize the high street, you need people with high-paying jobs, because they are the people who need fancy coffee, frothy coffee, if you're a candidate from Wales. And it would also revitalize the consumer economy, because that's what we want. We want more consumer economy to get access to more of the thing. And then, of course, so that's why would my central question with all of this is why, if I'm an investor, right, or I'm a big allocator of capital, I'm a pension fund or BlackRock, I'm really, I have billions of available pennies to spend on good projects. Why would I invest in any of these places? Why would I go to Stoke-on-Trent or Scunthorpe or wherever the hell, or Dundee for that matter, instead of just saying, well, London, Oxford and Cambridge already do all this stuff and they seem to have a high level of success, and the people with the educations and the jobs are already there. Why would I bother moving myself out to the periphery? And I don't know, Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, but the answer to that particular mystery because the government are going to pay you lots of money in subsidies and never actually ask you to build a factory? I think so. I mean, Phil, I'm happy to stand corrected on this, but this is my end reading of this. That's my central problem with this whole redistributive thing, which doesn't really seem to work.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, if they want to try and kind of generalise, make London everywhere, basically, then it's not going to work. But I think it's a bit more subtle than that. It sounds like a Starmer defender, because, I really can't stand Keir Starmer, and I hate his politics, and, he's certainly not my choice. But what I kind of understand it by is, say, for example, in Stoke-on-Trent, we've got here, the key industries here, or the pot banks, which are still here. And you've had a progressive reshoring of the pottery industry over the last 10, 15 years here. But it's been a jobless reshoring. So been all the jobs that went out to the Far East 20, 30 years ago, Labour's got too expensive back out there now, and so it's all coming back. All the production's coming back, and you're having massive automation of factories with only tiny numbers of people being employed. I think that it's going to basically, in Stoke-on-Trent, the council are going to be subsidising the local pottery industry even more, and perhaps giving some money to the local universities to, help them with their biotech stuff and their video game stuff that they are currently on. And so it's about, looking at the industries that already exist in these places basically offering them generous subsidies. That's how I would look at it. So in Derby, that would mean Rolls-Royce getting even more subsidies to produce new nuclear reactors and more bombs and more aircraft engines and that sort of thing. But I guess we'll see, because if my reading of this is correct, and if Starmer is going to allow local authorities to be a bit more entrepreneurial, you're going to see some absolute car crashes of cases where you're going to have, local town in local shire suddenly deciding that it wants to be, I don't know, a hub for the space industry. Yes. And they're going to be spending loads of money trying to, encourage students to fly their rockets off their fields and kind of set up their own little kind of starport and little industry.
Well, we have identified
and of course it'll be a disaster.
7 starports across the UK in a previous episode. The UK space program is great.
Yeah, so I mean that's pretty much how it's going to work. And of course the other issue with this as well, which of course the report glosses over, is there are massive potentials for conflicts of interest when it comes to local councillors investing in their mates' businesses, but having even more money to invest. And they might have a kind of a Michelle Mone-esque relationship to some of these companies that the funds end up in.
I mean, the thing that I was particularly thinking about, which I want to do a separate episode on, is the things that have recently come out about Thurrock Council. They have wasted £850 million on a guy who's just really well connected with the council director of finance and some of the people on the council.
So I've been thinking about this, and to me, right, so let's back up a second, because initially we were talking about how Labour wants to encourage its bright young things to stay local by giving local power and the power to make a difference. But forgive the deep cynic in me, but why do careerist politicians gravitate toward power? And ultimately it's because of a potential to be bribed. We don't necessarily call it bribes. We say that it's just influence. It's just paying, 25 grand to be able to talk to Keir Starmer at Labour conference or whatever. But that's kind of what it is. Fundamentally, it's about them getting paid one way or another. And so, as I see it, if they devolve meaningful power to the local level, you're just going to get Thurrock Council. And sure, you'll get bright young things will stick around, but will stick around so they can do a Thurrock Council and find some way to kind of hand money to people who are friendly to them in a way that ends up, if not in their direct pocket, then in the pockets of someone close to them or someone in their class in a I scratch your back, you scratch mine kind of arrangement. That's the end point for it. And
how much,
that's not to say... Sorry, go on, Jamie.
I was going to say, how much did you say they spent on this guy for his influence or whatever?
I mean, they didn't spend it on his influence. It's a complicated story that I need to do my homework on to tell the story properly, but they have lost already something like 850 million by investing in his companies.
Fucking, I mean, if they wanted to bring a new digital economy to New Britain, they could have spent that 850 million on FIFA packs or some shit. It would
Honestly,
have done more.
I'm not even joking when I say it would have been just as good, in fact, possibly even a better use of the money, frankly, because at least there'd be nominally something to show for it at the end.
It's how these things work, it kind of boggles the brain, really. When I used to work for a Labour MP, I used to observe Stoke-on-Trent City Council close up, and it used to be the case that basically a new executive level officer would come in on a 6-figure salary, and all of a sudden, all of the kind of the things that they do, little contracts that they have, like little consultancies. So let's say, for example, there was an issue with crime and joblessness in Stoke-on-Trent. Yeah. And so what they would do is they'd hire someone in to kind of, as a consultant, to provide a presentation to the senior officers. But these senior officers would have groups of people around them who would then, basically get the contract for providing those consultations and then deliver it to the council. So there was one particularly egregious case. I was chatting to one of the stats blokes at the council, where they wanted a presentation. They needed to know something about traffic flow in the city council. So they paid 20 grand to this consultant. And what this consultant did was, who was associated with one of the executives, was he came down to the stats department and said, give us all of your data on local traffic. They handed over the data. The guy put it in a PowerPoint presentation and got 20 grand for it. It's absolutely incredible. The grift is amazing. And it is as simple as that.
Is this not just representative of what Starmer's Britain would be? I mean, we already know this is essentially what it is at the moment, but Starmer's office has surrounded himself with just essentially, well, I was going to say yes men, but they're not even yes men. They're just men that tell him what to say, and lobbyists and people who have extremely vested interests in private health, for example, and and then these people are essentially double dipping on not just the power that they through Keir Starmer would wield, but also on the, as you say, like the grift which comes with it.
Would you perhaps say, Alistair, that nurturing the new economy will require better practical cooperation between the public and private sector, using the immense scale of our universities and health service, in particular, to promote innovation across our economy?
I know how we've not.
It's going to be this, like, the Starmer's New Britain is going to run the same way as the current one. The only difference is going to be that to get, like, the fucking contract to give them, like, fucking shit PPE or whatever, instead of having to run a pub that Matt Hancock frequents, you instead just, like, pay them cash.
Or you run the pub that your local council visits. Because it's the same. You're in the same ballpark. You just devolve the level at which the mates contracts takes place.
All you're doing is changing the location of the pub.
Yes, essentially. I mean,
I think it's like the difference between like New Labour and the Tories is the Tories hand out all the contracts to like just carve up the fucking country and like take away public money and everything. They just hand that out based on like their old boys network, whereas like New Labour's radical, like fucking, do you know what I mean, modern solution to that problem is to have it based purely on how much money they donate to the party. And that makes it fair because then it's like based on a meritocracy because everyone knows you've got more money if you're just a better person.
Yeah, I think Starmer's kind of really is sort of making a rod for his own back here, because if we can define Starmerism as a kind of a political project, what it is basically modernising the state, or at least giving the state the appearance of a modern veneer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the kind of the programme that Gordon Brown set out for him does superficially appear to modernise the British state, get rid of the centralisation and putting economic powers lower down. But because Starmer is a very sort of a managerial character, a very uptight character, and you can't he wants to be seen to be doing things properly. So if his programme ends up resulting in a springtime for corrupt officials, corrupt councillors, and any old grifter in the land, that leaves him incredibly politically vulnerable because he puts all of his political capital into this. I'm a, as Tony Blair put it, I'm a pretty straight guy. That's how Starmer. That's how Starmer markets himself.
I had historical shivers.
That's an extremely cursed phrase.
I can't imagine like what the on the ground impact of this kind of shit would be. Like bin men, but they have scrum meetings now.
Well, no,
it'll be like the fucking the heydays of Tony Blair's New Deal. It'll be like agricultural and computing colleges behind the bus station again.
Yeah,
fuck yeah, it will be
training the next generation of Wi-Fi enabled dry stone wall builders.
But I mean, I think that is more likely because this whole report and everything around it is very much like structured around like the new whizzy tech sectors and innovation and all that stuff. So like it's very much geared where these people are geared themselves, which is university graduates. With startup-y ideas, like bin men are far too like low down the ladder. Like that's not.
But if it was Wi-Fi enabled bin men. Then you'd be talking.
Yeah, fair enough.
An app on your phone that tells you that the bin men are coming tomorrow. We've done it. We've cracked it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I do think that's kind of like, especially where they're talking about this whole decentralization thing. Like, I don't think necessarily like purely, in the theory crafting realm. I think like getting some measure of power and some level of the like Britain is a weirdly centralized country. Like, Whitehall runs incredible amounts of everything. Like, I think a level of decentralization, and, would that were a political party that was dedicated to, freeing some parts of it, that's not a bad idea. I think, frankly, there's much to be said for it. But I have extreme doubts as to whether or not, given Starmer and his associates running this party, whether or not they would actually be able to do it in such a way. And part of the reason I think they won't, and Phil, this is also partly what you wrote on your blog, is that they are firmly committed to being trapped in capitalist realism. And while I don't want to sort of go on and on about 2019, but the difference between a sort of Corbyn-led decentralization would have been that they would have given the state the resources to do things in-house and then empowered the workers to do it themselves, rather than just have this be yet another public-private cooperation horseshit mechanism.
Yeah, that's right. This what drove what Corbyn was all about, and what Corbynism was all about was it's pushing labourism to its limits, to democratising society, basically allowing the powers of labour to fully assume their own powers. Where of course Starmer is managerial, technocracy. That's what he's interested in. And I think also, kind of returning a little bit to the decentralisation stuff, I think there's an element of statecraft here too, in the sense that if he can kind of push down a lot of economic policy from the top to local authorities or to metro mayors, that means that his government get off the hook when it comes to bad local decisions and that sort of thing. It's the local politicians that are to blame. You remember that George Osborne, he was hailed as a political genius because he, by making cuts fall harder on Labour councils, he believed that the local people would blame Labour councils for the cuts rather than the government, and to a degree that happened. So likewise, yeah,
we love a scapegoat in this country.
Yeah, and so I think a similar thing's going on here with Starmer as well, because of course Tory councils won't necessarily be massively interested in doing a lot of the investing in stuff. They'll just use their money to, I don't know, offer even lower council tax and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And
that means that those areas will empty of younger people. There'll be, population drift and all kinds of problems, but he wouldn't get the blame for it. And so I think this is, it's about insulating Starmer from some of the economic failures that are likely to happen over the course of the next 10, 15 years or so. But maybe I'm just overthinking it, but there will be that element of statecraft in there somewhere.
I mean, it'll make our jobs a lot easier because we'll be able to sit here and go, no, it's actually this cunt's fault.
I mean, so although interestingly on that topic, not to delve too deeply into it, one of the things they do promise in terms of like the devolution, especially to Wales, Northern Ireland, and Scotland, is to say that members of the Senate and the SNP should get the same parliamentary security protections as Westminster MPs do now. And I'm like, are you bribing them with having their own security guards? It's just such a weird thing of the it's a part of the new sort of constitutional arrangement section.
I think I don't think it's necessarily bribing them. I think it's God help me here.
It's inflating their status, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
well,
status thing.
It's inflating the status, and it's also genuinely if they do essentially a kind of devolution, devolving power, not in the necessarily the political sense that we're currently familiar with it, then Westminster MPs are really paranoid that they're all going to be shot or knifed or whatever. This is a genuine thing that I consistently hear from my contacts down in Westminster, that they're all super paranoid these days. So I think a large part of this is them going, well, clearly if they have power, they will be equally disliked too. So I think it's more kind of probably on that end.
I think partly that is what it is, but I was just for me it was more such a weird detail for them to pick out on. But I do want to spend a little bit of time in terms of the constitutional stuff is in one of their other big ideas is to talk about what they want to do with the House of Lords, which all right, first up, yes, the House of Lords is a giant corrupt mess that doesn't work and it should be replaced. that's an entirely correct opinion. I have just no problems with it. Although what I found really funny about the way they write about it is they do this throughout the whole report, by the way. They write about it as if everything that's gone wrong in Britain, and why everything is as shit as it is they just say, oh, it's the past 10 years. It's the Tories. And it's like, specifically the last House of Lords reform, you know, they mentioned specifically, we've talked about it in an old episode, is they say one of the things that's completely unjustified is that there's still 92 hereditary peers sitting there. And I'm like, but that was the Blair reform, like the last House of Lords reform that made it the mess it now is, with the patronage system and the PM essentially being able to elevate anybody they want, is the Blair reform. But that's never said. Like, none of the problems in this report are ever older than 10 years. Like, Britain was pure and clean until, like, let's say 12 years ago.
Yeah, you remember back to the leadership election in the Labour Party following the 2019 defeat, and you know, and one of Keir Starmer's lines was that, you know, I'm not going to criticise the previous Labour government, and I'm not going to criticise Jeremy Corbyn. So he was trying to kind of, you know, appear equidistant between the camps in order to get votes.
It's funny which one of them he decided to drop.
Yeah.
But of course, he's not going to criticise or draw attention to what happened under the previous Labour government, because he sees himself, both in terms of the slogans and in terms of a lot of the personnel, as well as the continuation of the 97-2010 Labour government. You know, he's picking up where Gordon Brown left off.
I was going to say, I mean, Gordon Brown is the main author of this report as well. So, like, clearly he's not going to say, oh, yeah, something was wrong between 1997 and 2010. You know, like, clearly he's not going to say that.
And it's also just farcical on its face, because whatever, I mean, you know, don't trust a word that comes out of Keir Starmer's mouth, but saying that he's going to continue where Tony Blair left off is bullshit, because he's going to just pick up where fucking Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson and David Cameron and all the rest of them left off, because it's exactly what his starting point is going to be. Because, I mean, it's, you know, it is tried to say there is no difference between the Tories and Labour at this point, but what is the material difference? What material difference will there be from Keir Starmer versus a Tory government at the next election? Very little.
Well, I mean, in a literal sense, he would have to start from the same material, you know, reality. You know, Starmer makes his own history, but not in an environment of his own choosing. But you know, it's. But to get back to the House of Lords thing is like, so. Right, so the House of Lords is very bad. We should replace it. And the new House of Lords would be a council of regions and what was it again? God help me, nations. And regions. And it would be sort of very similar in scope and ability as the current House of Lords. So it has no role in forming a government. It can't make decisions on taxation. It's not able to reject legislation. So like it would be constrained in a similar way as the old one should, except for like two important carve-outs. The first would be is the House of Lords, the new one, which would have like 200-ish members, would be like a sort of an ethics oversight for the House of Commons. They would stand for and enforce standards in public life.
Okay, yeah. How many of these other fucking ethics boards, bodies, or whatever that have existed just only ever done their fucking job when they've actually had they've had their nose to the fucking grindstone? Well, I'm sure there'll be a ton of difference with that.
I mean, again, tangentially speaking, but like this report goes on at length. They reference Michelle Mone and like other events very specifically. But you know, I'm old enough to remember Cash for Honours. You know, like this was not this level of corruption is not a new thing that arose out of the last 10 years. So you know, but briefly as an aside.
Also, when you say it's going to be a council of nations and regions,
yes.
Does that just Scotland just gets one thing and Wales gets one thing and then like British regions get a thing each? Like English regions, I should say, sorry.
Yeah, there's some sort of quota system, isn't there? Plus there's certain competencies.
Is there? I couldn't find this. I couldn't find the composition of this thing.
Yeah. I mean, they haven't said what the composition would be. Obviously, that will be something to be consulted on. But I think the intention is that there'll be quotas, perhaps based on the old European Union election constituencies. And,
okay.
Keir Starmer's trying to get us to emulate the European Parliament. You heard it here first,
we say
folks.
that. But of course, that is what, you know, the Daily Express will certainly run with that.
Yeah.
And also,
because that makes sense to do that.
And also imagine like a new House of Lords where, much like the European Union, we sent like the most Brexity people and they had the majority in that chamber. You know, because like, because you would be required as a citizen, I guess. I mean, again, the makeup and how this thing is put together is very, very unclear. But like, you, the citizen, would presumably at some point have to vote for people who sit in this chamber, or they get appointed. Like, it's really unclear. But like, if you're voting on
a second, do it like jury duty.
I shudder to think.
We need to go back to the ancient Greek modality of democracy. Just have literally every MP is just plucked like jury duty from the public.
But did I imagine it? Was there something about citizens' juries?
There is something about citizens' assemblies in it, which is one of my most hated things.
Citizens' jury sounds like some really severe like victim payback scheme or something.
Oh, those no, but those we're going to get as well. That's not part of this, but that's part of the crime reform thing. Yeah, that's the
good grief.
Yeah.
I said this last week about this fucking regions and nations thing. It is the biggest cell phone you could possibly do to say one Scotland is worth X amount of English regions.
Yeah.
I can't think of a better way to shoot yourself in the dick politically in Scotland. A place where you're very certain that you actually do deserve all those votes and they will come back eventually.
But isn't there also something about them giving the nations enhanced privileges within the system?
Yeah. So they
get a special parking space and a free ice cream on Tuesdays.
A special security guard to stand next to the special boy car.
First pick of the courses at the bus centre, education centre.
Yeah.
Oh, I've skipped over the stuff about the job centre, but so like the the stuff about the House of Lords. So they would enforce the standards in public life, along with Alistair. If you're curious, there would be a separate ethics commissioner that cannot be fired by the Prime Minister, and they would have the power to so like it would just be more boards, more people doing more pieces of paper, and that way you create a more ethical society.
That's a new Labour way, though, isn't it? You remember that, one of the things that Tony Blair and Gordon Brown did was they didn't fundamentally change the post-war, the post-Thatcherite settlement. But what they did do is they introduced loads of quangos, loads of bureaucracy to regulate and to manage these new marketised relationships that exist. And this is a kind of a return to type for Starmer.
Yeah. So the other thing that they would be able to do is as like an active power is to be a control mechanism to ensure like a new series of social rights are enforced across the country, and judge whether or not the government of the day is actually making opportunities real across the country. So all the stuff that we talk about with the clustering and the spreading of opportunity, the House of Lords will be able to write a report and say, no, you're not spreading opportunity enough.
This genuinely sounds like those fucking like Nimrods on TikTok who say you should like expose your anus to the sun every morning to power up or whatever. Are you making opportunities real across the country?
Yes.
Yeah, fuck all that noise. Why don't we just have a referendum every 2 years on whether to dissolve the government? That would really shake things up.
I genuinely think that we're closer to having the government decide to dissolve the people at the moment, but it's so and they would also, because they're now, instead of the House of Lords, they are the Council of Regions and Nations. They would be the main chamber where reporting for all the new intergovernmental councils that they're going to establish, they would also go there. So there would be more councils to do more paper shuffling, which is also, if you think about it, this whole thing is incredible, is they don't seem to want to remove any layers of bureaucracy or make things, they just want to add more layers because, again, that's jobs for the white collar people, Phil, that you were talking about at the start. And just again, if we just write more reports and everybody watches each other all the time, we will have a good society.
That's it. You remember when Starmer was the director of public prosecutions? his main thing was being an effective administrator. He kind of redesigned the rules of how the organisation operated, more meetings, more kind of staff training, all of that kind of stuff. And this is his programme for the DPP writ large, but on the surface of the British state.
It's always good when a guy has like one trick and he just tries it everywhere he fucking goes. Doesn't matter what it is. It worked once. It'll work again. It's fine.
So as part of this House of Lords reform package and the new sort of the way they want to keep, and I'm trying to keep the door to Scott Paul sort of slightly closed, but like the way they want to keep Scotland inside the House is essentially by giving them new ways of benefiting from the Union, which is, I don't know, Phil, maybe I read it wrong, but it's just Devo Max, right? This is just more devolution of powers, including, weirdly enough, like in some scenarios, they would allow Scotland to not like join the EU itself, but to join like EU subsidiary bodies like the Erasmus program or something if they wanted to.
Oh,
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
off. You can take the dog skiing again.
Yeah, it's kind of like some very little kind of international agreements the Scottish Government will be able to enter into. But I also think as well that part of this, particularly the kind of the stuff about empowering local councils, is designed also to create a little bit of friction between the Scottish Government and their local authorities in Scotland as well, and kind of create a new area of kind of argy-bargy and recrimination, which they think will tear down the SNP over time, will wear down the SNP over time, and allow, a kind of a shiny new Scottish Labour to kind of zoom back to pole position and resume its rightful place as the kind of designated leader of Scotland.
Yeah, the SNP's already doing the slow crawl towards the wall of fuck-alls happening anymore, and look elsewhere. So I'm fairly certain they'll be able to outmaneuver whatever fucking horribly radical reactionary fucking tendency takes over that vacuum.
I mean, they did have the following fucking incredible line when they're talking about Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland in particular. Let me read you this a little bit. This is from the start of this whole section about more devolution. The United Kingdom, as a voluntary nation of nations, is unique in the world. Over centuries, it has delivered enormous benefits for each of its constituent nations. Period. Declaration over.
Imperialism is a benefit for some.
Yes. I mean, the Highland clearances were a benefit for some. The potato famine was a benefit for some, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
People are saying that Britain is good.
So yeah, essentially, like they would try to buy off, like especially Scottish independence, but they also talk about Wales and Northern Ireland, by essentially just like giving them a bigger version of home rule within this sort of quasi-federalized Britain. But that is still fundamentally controlled from the centre, from London, but now with like, more empowered. So it's like, if you're a nationalist, why don't you give up your nationalism in exchange for a more empowered local council? I think that's and the ability to join Erasmus and go fuck off for 6 months to a university in France or something. I think that's sort of how the deal goes.
Yeah, if you become absorbed in the local admin structures, you'll become too busy trying to, I don't know, buy out the local bus company and get more routes on the bus timetable to start thinking about independence for your nation or anything more radical than that. So yeah, this is very much kind of written into this constitution. It's about getting people into the technocratic game, and then once they're in there, they're not going to want to leave because they're really into managing all these budgets and looking at all these spreadsheets, and again putting on those hard hats and go to the construction sites.
Yeah. People tried to do this with me for EVE Online, and then it was all spreadsheets. I'm not buying this.
Well, I want to very briefly talk about, just to return to this localization for one more bit, and then we'll wrap up and sort of move to conclusions. But like of course, the big question, the other big question amidst all this talk of devolution, whether you're talking about Scotland or Wales or Scunthorpe or Stoke or the Manchester Mayoral Combined Authority, is just like, right, so how did they, where's the money going to come from? So part of it is just a shifting of literal budget from Westminster back to the local councils or the local authorities. The other part is, and they're not going to do this in like current ways, which is like 1 year cycles. They're going to extend it to 3 year settlement cycles, which is, much better. That really gives councils the space to try some new things. They're going to be block grants, blah, 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 blah. But the most important thing is, because we were just mentioning buses, is the following paragraph. Additional brackets local investment is also badly needed in infrastructure, so like buses, which we talked about. And here again, the private sector can play a leading role, notably in properly structured partnerships in which private enterprise can apply investment disciplines to the delivery of new infrastructure assets alongside public investment and provision. Now, if you're wondering what that is, it's PFI necromancy. It's fucking back.
Like how we're talking about empowering local councils and everything, and just the Preston model just absolutely never has come up, and never will come up because it is tinged with the miasma of being vaguely left wing.
Preston should have simply started charging extra through private companies for car parking.
I mean, essentially what this is, this is just pothole rentierism. You can get your roads cleaned up, but then they're part owned by Serco or some shit, and then and then they would have to, local councils would have to raise more taxes to pay back the PFI thing. So again, this is just this terrible system where I don't think it's gonna win anything. And sort of let's to move towards wrapping this up, because I wanted to talk a bit about the way all this stuff, this whole report has sort of landed. And already you saw, I think it was yesterday or something, Ed Balls was on the television warning Starmer not to make too many big promises they can't keep. And then Starmer was on television, I think today, saying that, the House of Lords reform is sort of more like a long-term project and not something we're desperately keen to implement in the straight away. So already I think anything that was remotely radical in this, which is not a radical report, is already being just eaten alive. And I don't know, Phil, what you what do you think? Let's say Starmer gets into power with a reasonable majority. What of this remains in practice?
The House of Lords.
Hard to say. I mean, the thing is with the House of Lords thing is that it's a very handy tool for Labour leaders to kick upstairs, MPs that might otherwise give them hassle on the back benches. Not from a kind of a left wing standpoint, obviously, but kind of right wing complainers and moaners and people that just get in his way and will cramp the leader's style. And we've seen Starmer do that. He's done that on a number of occasions with some right-wingers, whether they're in Parliament or outside of Parliament. And so with that tool of patronage now gone, I suppose he can say that, if you behave yourself, we'll put you at the top of the list for voting into the new council of the regions and the nations. And so there's an element of patronage there. But I think that there will be some backlash because, as you know, there's nothing more constitutionally cretinous than a backbench Labour MP who, unlike the Tories, appear to genuinely love the traditions and everything that is associated with the House of Commons. So, of all of the things,
how dare you talk about Chess Phillips like that?
It's the House of Lords reform that is most at risk. I think everything else that we've talked about today, we'll go through precisely for the reasons that we've described. Well, we've said they're not, these are not great ideas, precisely because it offers a new way for capital to fill its pockets on the state dollar that it's bound to happen, basically.
Yeah. And to sort of finish it up, I think, we started talking about the Labour Business Conference and it being oversubscribed and, people paying 25k for the platinum ticket to have a chance to meet with a shadow minister and get shout outs from the podium. I think 25k, on the off chance that this thing works out, 25k is a very small amount of money to get in early and getting good with, not just like the DWP or like whichever element, because all the Whitehall ministries will be in here, right? And they'll all want to get in here in some way. So like 25k is such a small price of entry. So when Labour now talks about, oh, it's so good, like big business is flocking to us and this is a sign that we are now a credible bunch of people, it's because capital, 25k is chump change. Like,
it's charging fucking pennies. Like, why bother? Like, why not take the chance? Why not just go for it?
Yeah,
it makes sense. Funnily enough, the only way that fucking they've actually had any sort of good ideas here is on how to easily sell thing to people with money.
Yeah,
stick with what you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Phil, I want to leave any final thoughts of this episode to you, and if you're finalised, then feel free to plug your blog and any other things you want our delightful audience to be aware of.
Yeah, sure. I do. Sadly, I'm kind of grown obsessed with Keir Starmer, and also with the Conservative Party as well. And on my blog, which is called All That Is Solid, just Google it. It's at the top. Also known as a very public sociologist, its former name. I write about these horrors nearly every day, and somehow I've managed to remain a relatively balanced and well-humoured individual.
Appearances on this
we've
podcast,
thrown being well balanced right out the window.
So one thing that always mystifies me when it comes to politicians accepting money, and you just touched on it, from companies, is how ridiculously cheap politicians are in this country.
Yes.
You pay someone £1,000 and they will ask a question for you in the House of Commons. They'll go into gymnastics for you. Pay 25k, as you say, and you get an audience with Keir Starmer. This is ridiculous. You look at the professionals, look at the United States, where congressmen there, they take tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for you to kind of have a sit-down chinwag with them for 5 minutes.
Yeah, if you want a piece of legislation...
Say something about Britain, that our elite are so cheap.
Yeah, in the US, if you want a piece of legislation, like, you are going to have to employ, like, a number of very large sums. Like, that's just kind of the given. Whereas here, it's just, it's pennies. It's embarrassing.
Was it Matt Hancock who got essentially bought off by going like a £300 ticket to like a horse race?
Yes, he did. But then he does represent Newmarket, so that's kind of to be expected.
It's also like, the imperial core that sets like trading rules for a significant portion of the world. It's got more power, so of course it's going to be more expensive. Whereas backwater turf normal island, like, what are you really buying? You get what you pay for.
I mean, it's still like the 7th largest economy in the world, and the government still creams off a bit off the top. Like, it's still like it's pennies on the dollar, which I think, or pennies on the pound, I should say, pennies on the euro. But yeah, like I don't know. I think if you're looking at this, if you're like an unengaged voter, or you're like a sort of melty person on Twitter, and like, if this is the strength of the argument, because we were told last year and the year before that, it's too soon to deliver big policy, and, we can't really do any of that. And if this is the big policy piece, then I'm just like, I'm still not convinced Labour's going to win the next election, and I'm still not convinced if they win, they won't win on the back of this or any other substantive argument. They'll just win it on the back of the Tories having, after 12 or 15 years, finally run out of fucking road. And just having fucked the dog so bad. So, like,
are you saying you're insufficiently whelmed by this?
After reading 155 pages of it, my whelming is less than you might expect.
Even lower than that. Wow.
I mean, Phil, how's your level of whelm?
Yeah, it's kind of gone through the floor, basically. Yeah.
2 out of 10 would not whelm again.
What would be interesting is what Keir Starmer puts some more flesh on the bones about his attitude towards trade unions, because I've been writing about that recently as well. Because his role for trade unions will fit very much in whatever model or modernisation of the state. Is he going to go back to the corporatist regime of the continental Europeans in the post-war period? Well, obviously we'll have to wait and see. That's beyond the scope of this podcast.
Yep. So I think that'll do us for yet another episode of Podcasting is Praxis. Phil, thank you so very much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure.
You're welcome. It's a relief not to have to talk about Tories for a change, or at least Tories in blue.
Well, we'll do that next time if you want. David, shall we plug our things then?
Yeah, let's do that. So you can get bonus episodes at patreon.com/praxiscast. You can see us doing streams on Wednesdays and Thursdays at twitch.tv/praxiscast. You can buy merch if you so want. It is called Buy a Hoodie, which is praxiscast.teemill.com. And that is all from us. We will have episodes coming throughout the festive period. In fact, we're just off to record the episode, which is going to be released on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day for patrons. So if you would like to have a little bit extra,
if you would like some distraction from your disgusting uncle, unless
we'll be talking about a good Die Hard film and a bad Die Hard film because it's Christmas. So if you would like that episode, it will be on the Patreon, patreon.com/praxiscast. And all I've got left to say there is thank you very much again, Phil.
My pleasure.
Quick question. I was going to ask Phil, did you have anything that you wanted to advertise other than your blog?
I was going to mention my book. And if you're wondering for a present for that annoying Conservative voting relative, might I be so humble as to recommend my book, Falling Down the Conservative Party and the Decline of Tory Britain, which recounts in excruciating detail the decline and fall of the Conservatives and how it's going to be incredibly difficult for them to ever form a government again.
Excellent. Cool. There you go. A book which we will happily not feature on this podcast because it will actually be good.
Yeah, thereby ruling it out forever. All right, bye-bye.
Cheerio.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.